Hey everybody, and welcome to this Youth Summit. I'm Roy Kareem. I'm one of the Black and Green Ambassadors for Bristol. I'm also a director of something called Bright Green Future, which is an environmental leadership program for 16 to 19-year-olds around the UK, based at a charity in the fair city of Bristol. I'm delighted to have Mayor Marvin Rees with me. Do we need, what more introduction can I give you, or is it?
I don't know, it depends on what you've been reading. Don't believe everything, no?
Don't believe everything here. Thank you so much for taking the time to join with us.
That's all right.
Speaking with young people all around the southwest. The main thing we're talking about is this sort of engineering question of how might we reach net zero by 2030 within the city of Bristol. I think that question is supposed to inspire people to think about solutions rather than just kind of all the problems, but like how practically might we get there. Bristol has been a little bit at the forefront of being able to actually sort of start to put out plans of these are the steps we're going to take. You've got a one city plan, you've got a climate action plan. Do you want to just sort of, take us through what its plans are and how it would like to achieve this pretty ambitious target of net zero by 2030?
You said a couple of things that made me think of a couple more points actually.
Okay.
One is it's really interesting to think about it as an engineering problem.
Okay.
I was in a meeting last week where people were talking about taking on a climate officer, and they had just lost someone who was an expert in bringing forward what they call capital projects, big buildings, transport infrastructure. And I said, actually, the skill set we need is not necessarily someone who wears the t-shirt. It's someone who knows how to manage, projects that are worth hundreds of millions of pounds.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally what we need to do is change the very systems that underpin city life. Transport system, energy system, water system, food system, housing system, so that we have the ability and actually have no choice other than to live a low impact life.
Yeah.
So at the moment, the way we've put it in the city is, if you want to live a low impact life, you have to be conscious, you have to be knowledgeable, probably have a little bit of spare disposable income because it costs a bit more, and you have to go out and do it.
Yeah.
What we need are a set of systems that support city life, that mean that you don't have to think about living a low impact life.
So you're not having to make a conscious
You don't have to
choice.
make it's just the way it works,
Yeah.
right? So we've planned to have, water produced in a very efficient way. We've planned to have a waste system that's decarbonised and actually minimise the generation of waste in the first instance. And that's just the way the system works. That's the way we'll do it.
Okay.
But if I say a bit about Bristol and then shut me up if I go on too long, right?
No, crack on.
So first off, we want to set it out like this. Climate does not exist in an abstract. It clearly is an existential threat. But as the mayor of Bristol, we are a city of 42 square miles, right? That's it. We ain't getting any bigger.
Yeah.
Right? We're not.
Yeah.
42 square miles. We have 6,000 people.
Okay.
By the middle of this century, we'll be 500,000 people. Well, 550, sorry.
Okay.
So we're going to grow by nearly 100,000 people in the next 30 years. At the moment, we have 15 to 16,000 people on our housing waiting list. Right? We have over 1,000 households in temporary accommodation. We're one of the most unequal cities in the UK. We have 1 in 4 of our children living in poverty, 1 in 5 households at risk of hunger, and we know that through COVID that's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Right? The people who are most marginal get hit first and hardest, and they're going to be least well placed to benefit from any uptick when it comes. You just see the cut to universal credit and all that, right? So this is the raw material of Bristol. So we have to meet the needs of that population, but we have to do it in 42 square miles, right, in the face of a climate and ecological emergency. And we have to do all that at the same time. And that's the point I make, is as we approach climate, it has to be multidimensional. And our approach to both reducing the impact we have on the planet, but also mitigating the changes that are going to come our way anyway, have to be done through what we call a just transition. And that means that those people who are most marginalised don't end up paying disproportionately the highest price. So you could say, right, let's just close down all fossil industries. We put 100,000 people out of work.
Yeah.
What happens? Well, one of the dangers that happens then is you end up with the potential of more extremist politics. We've seen that in the United States under Trump.
Yeah.
People get desperate and other things, open up my coal mines again. That's the guy that'll bring me jobs. He's a climate change denier, doesn't like immigrants. Let's go with that character. So we have to manage the justice and the politics alongside the practical interventions with this.
Do you feel there's a real risk if there isn't an active intervention, active plan, that it would be an unjust transition?
I think that's the default position, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get an unjust transition. So look, there's a reality here, right? The climate movement is disproportionately driven by white middle class people who see the world through white middle class lens. So I remember one of the candidates from one of the other parties that's particularly associated with the environment kept on saying, just pay a few pennies more. Well, some people don't have a few pennies, but that was the mentality. We were at a clean air event, and an academic from one of the universities was saying air quality is the single most important thing in the city right now. I said, well, hold on, I'm dealing with families that are at risk of losing their children to knife crime. She said, yeah, but how many people get stabbed? I said, well, not in your world.
Yeah.
But there is a group of people for whom this is a huge challenge to them right now, and that lack of respect for where people are in their world, is massive. And so I think there's a communications thing in environmental movement where it has to earn the right to speak into people's lives sometime and deal with the issues they are. But let's talk about what we're doing here. First off, this is not just a city council issue. So you've read the Bristol One City Plan. That is how we, the health service, the police, our universities, businesses, voluntary sector, all work together, because you're not going to get a city outcome unless you have a whole city approach. And there are lots of organisations that manage land and drive energy use in the city as well. So we've developed that approach. Through that, we developed something called the One City Climate Strategy, which was written not by the council, but by our city partners, with academic excellence as well. And I say that's important because it's got the science behind it. With 10 areas for action. I won't read them all, but you can imagine them, right? Energy use, transport, buildings, food, space for nature as well. So all that stuff is reflected in our ecological and our climate plans. And amongst the high profile things we're really driving in on is delivering more housing that is obviously more efficient. There's a dilemma here. Zero carbon housing costs more to build at the moment. There's a challenge for your engineers.
Yeah.
So you could so a developer could say, well, we'll give you 100%, we'll give you zero carbon housing, but now you can only have 15% affordable homes on that development rather than 25% affordable homes. Well, we've got a housing crisis, so what do you do? Right,
This was a question that came up. So our students have been typing in a live chat this morning, and one of those questions was exactly that of zero carbon homes, low carbon homes. How do you square that circle of making them affordable for people?
These are the dilemmas, and I'll get onto the final point in a sec. Mass transit system, we're really pushing. We're a city that's growing. We need a decarbonised mass transit offer. We don't have one. We've had a patch and mend approach to Bristol buses, but we need that public transport offering. And then we can actually be more assertive in pushing people onto the public transport system when there's the one that's viable alternative. And we've got heat network coming through. Sadiq Khan was here a few weeks ago, marvelling, and he was very positive about our water source heat next to Castle Park. That's going to heat all the homes right next door in Castle View and beyond in the offices, decarbonised heat source. So we've got the heat networks going in. And we've got a programme called City Leap, which offers to transform Bristol's relationship with energy. It's a £1 billion package. I can say more about that in a minute, but it's a really innovative and, dare I say, also risky financial approach. But you have to take these risks to get there. But that comes to the final point I make is that, as I said, it's not when our climate emergency was brought to the city, the person who made the speech said, all that's needed is political will. Well, that's a very naive thing to say. We've got political will. What we need is billions of pounds to pay for it. To decarbonise Bristol's economy is about £10 billion. That's big infrastructure spend. Engineers will understand that. I'm part of a piece of work now with Greg Clark, with Core Cities, London councils. We've done the work now of stage one of a project that we're taking to COP to decarbonise the core cities, the 11 biggest cities in across the UK and London, is around about just over £200 billion. So we put the money on the table, and we don't have that money. So you can have all the will in the world, but until you're able to pay an engineer, a planner, the planner, and do all the stuff, it doesn't happen. So our message going into COP is that any declarations at COP from national governments have to be related to real places, dates, measurable outcomes, and money. It has to be related to finance. If it hasn't got those four, you're already on shaky ground.
So up to this point, too many good words, but not backed up by the money.
Well, certainly in terms of COP, I mean, there haven't been enough words around COP.
Yeah.
People are still struggling to know what it is actually all about, and they're getting involved. And actually, I was on a call earlier on, a cross-party call actually, with the local government association, and one of the points that was made was there's not enough of how it's going to happen. Right? And the missing piece in much of the how is working with cities and local government leaders. National governments don't actually do much. When you look at national government announcements, they're generally, well, we've put £4 billion into that.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
They just cast £4 billion out into the air? No, who spends that money? We do.
Right.
Or, you know, or government agencies that are on the ground in real places do. So you have to talk about the how, and just putting a bunch of money out there and then asking us to fight for it so we can get an element of grant. We spend loads of money and time bidding for government money, which takes away from our ability to focus on getting things done. So the whole financial modelling needs to be reviewed. But getting that money in a predictable way so that we can say, okay, we know that for the next, don't quote me on this, but we know that we've got £10 billion committed to us for a decarbonisation journey for the next 9 years. Then we can plan it, we can deliver it.
Something like net zero requires that sort of certainty of, you can't have funding for 2 years and be able to decarbonise a heat system, for example.
It's not project by project, carrot by carrot, shot by shot.
Yeah.
It's the reimagining and rebuilding of our cities so that they are decarbonised and, I would say, pretty importantly, built for nature.
Yeah.
Right? We've got to think, where are we going to put the houses? We have to build houses. Where are we going to put them? How are we going to line the infrastructure in? So we've got heat networks, right? Pipes underground that take heat around. Well, we're going to pull up your road, so we're going to put heat networks in to parts of the city. So just so you know, we're going to have roadworks all around the city centre.
Yeah.
Right?
Everyone loves that.
And then, everyone loves it. But if we're saying to them, the heat networks are going in, but so you know, this is the prize in 8-9 years' time, and it's guaranteed because the money's in the bank, we've got the plan, it's rolling itself out. These make things possible. And at the moment, some of that lubricant, as it were, isn't in the system.
So some of the students this morning have been tapping away, typing some questions. I'm going to go for some specifics. Talked a little bit about transport, how one of the ideas was a mass transport system, a public transport system. What is sort of the current sort of Bristol vision, or what would your vision be for something that's decarbonised or low carbon and could actually sort of help to get the city moving? What are some of the sort of practical steps that the city could take to sort of get there?
So the end goal is to have an underground overground for the city. Underground in the middle, overground on the outside. It's predictable, it's fast, it's decarbonised, and it's used by the hundreds of thousands of people every day. Connected to a ring of out to key points. A4 is a key one, out to Hicksgate, Keynsham, Bath. Airport is another one, going out along the I forget
Airport
the name.
Road.
It's not the A370. A37. Yeah, there you go, A38. Aztec West and Emerson's Green, Live Green as well. So you've got that as your spine. Linked in with that is the network of rail. So we've got the Severn Beach line, Brookside line coming through as well. And linked in with that is then the network of on-road transport systems, buses. And obviously what we'd want to do is link that in again with active travel options, bikes and walking as well. So that's the end game. In the short term, what we need to do is drive people, support them back onto public transport, particularly it's a massive hit during COVID as well. So we've done a deal with bus, so you've seen around the city, we've got bus prioritisation in the city. Bristol Bridge is now a bus gate. Don't come through the city centre. Private cars can't come down Baldwin Street. A bus gate would pedestrianise the old city. So it's all in part about encouraging people back onto public transport as well.
And how do you encourage people back, well, both back onto transport and even just to take it up from whatever level it was before? I remember, I'm a Londoner, and I remember whenever it was, there was suddenly just like a huge number more buses because there was just like a big lot of investment. and that seemed to, you know, the more bus capacity there was, it seemed like the more people wanted to use it, and eventually got to the point where there were almost too many buses on the road, because it's like, they're all buses. Yeah, how do you sort of encourage people to take those options?
So you come from London?
Yeah.
Well, you owe us a bit of money down here then, because London undoubtedly consumes,
sucked it
sucks in
per
the
person.
money.
Yeah.
There's no substitute for money with buses. Whether we're making routes cheaper, because they have to be paid for, drivers need to be paid, fuel needs to be paid, and buses need to be bought, and they're not cheap. So, yeah, we need to get the money. I would say actually also look at the model. I mean, TfL is London's company, right?
Yeah.
In Bristol it's a private company,
Yeah. Yeah.
And government won't allow us to take municipal ownership.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a bit of an issue for us. If we could have our own company with adequate financial funding, again, there's no ownership without enough money is a hospital pass. Then you know we'd be in a much better place. But clearly, it's about. I mean, public transport use is what a mix of a number of things, isn't it? Right? It's all those things you'd expect: predictability, you know, like cleanliness of the buses. But there are other things, and cost. There are other things that are like safety, which are not just about the bus. It's how safe is it to walk back and back and forth to the bus stop. And then you get into the issues of how do you design cities so that they're safe for everyone, particularly thinking about women at this particular point in time. You know, how do you make it safe for people to use public transport? So there's a whole bunch of things going into it.
We had a student specifically asking, you talked a bit about active transport, so walking and biking, and the student was saying, how, you know, like, there's some bike lanes in Bristol, but, you know, sometimes they find them a bit narrow and they sort of quickly stop. In my naive head, I'm like, oh, bike lanes, surely, you know, they're quite cheap and they can be kind of rolled out. What is Bristol's sort of steps to increase bike use and other sort of active transports? What would you like to see happen?
It's not actually easy just to roll them out.
I thought,
yeah. There are all sorts of laws about the roads, right, and processes we have to go through. So, for example, when we put the bus gate in on Bristol Bridge, that had to be on a temporary order. You have to consult. There's all sorts of processes. You'd expect that, otherwise you wouldn't want local dictatorship, would you? Right? Someone makes a decision on a whim and makes it happen. So what we did actually do, by the way, as soon as the COVID hit us, government released money for active travel, and we took that opportunity. Again, money. We took the opportunity when that money came through to put bike lanes in. I just talked to Don the other day about, who's my cabinet lead for transport, about, you know, just chivying up on making these bike lanes permanent, because you see then the bollards get knocked over by people and saying that's not okay. So we have to try and make them permanent. The other challenge for Bristol is it's an old city and some of the roads are narrow. But again, if we can get these things done at the right pace with the plan, if we can get people off the roads, give them a viable public transport offering, then we've got more space on the road surface for bikes and active travel, which we'd love to see.
and one of the things students were discussing was this idea of like a 15-minute city, where it's 15 minutes by some kind of active transport to get to your local shops or to get to your office or wherever it is you need to get to. If all of this stuff, specifically around transport, was to come to fruition and have the mass public transport system and all those good things, what would the city be like in 2030? We actually, then you had the funding and you could carry out all these steps. Like, what kind of transformation do you think that would actually bring to the city?
Well, I think it would be a more coherent city. You know, a number of years ago, I was working on in public health, and we were working on extremism, right, in extremist politics. And one of the points that people made was the biggest facilitator of political extremism was the fragmentation of the city, and the fact that it probably takes longer to get from Southmead to Hartcliffe than it would to get from Southmead to Swindon, right? Because to get across Bristol public transport is a chore. And yet in London, you can live miles apart from people, jump on a tube, it's 5 stops away, and you feel like you're in the same city. So I think it would bring more coherence to the city, absolutely, and would make like beautiful parts of the city more accessible to people. So getting people to, can enjoy Eastville and South Mills or Ashton Court because they can actually get there. There I would say there's a little bit of an issue that we have to pick up on 15-minute cities. So we want that, right? Okay. You can live your life and you can shop locally, and we want that. But one of the mayors did actually raise a concern. I was on a program with some mayors just a couple of weeks ago about how that could actually lead to increase in segregation. So again, this is where you have to tackle multiple issues at the same time. So if your housing stock, right, tends to be class and race segregated, and you don't have integrated communities, then a 15-minute community in a very wealthy housing stock becomes a wealthy island. A 15-minute community in a housing stock that's full of people on lower incomes becomes an island of poverty, and you don't end up with that joined up.
Lots of different 15-minute cities.
Yeah, so we have to do, it just says we have to do lots of things at the same time.
Yeah.
Don't always assume that good intentions always have good outcomes. Good intentions and good interventions can sometimes have negative impacts for some people. That doesn't mean you don't make the good intention, it just means you have to anticipate that and then make sure that you're doing all the other things to lessen that negative impact or make sure it doesn't happen at all.
Yeah. One of the figures I think that comes out of some of the city's action plans is this reduced in car use.
Yeah.
And it's not to do with emissions, it's just like, I think the figure is 40% reduced car use or cars on the roads. That, which, like, when I read that, I'm just like, that seems like that's impossible. How do you? And I think for me anyway, the thing about cars is often it's quite like a personal relationship that you have with your car in terms of that's how I get about, and it's not just the physical thing. It's actually there's almost like an emotional connection of I embody some of that.
It's your space.
Yeah. How do you sort of even begin to sort of engage with that? It's almost like a hearts and minds sort of campaign. Where does that begin to get to that kind of figure?
It's a cultural shift, isn't it? And it's a practical shift as well. So we just went through all that we're trying to push forward to get onto the mass transit, to get through our mass transit offer through make sure that what people experience in public transport again is culturally attractive as well. So there was a line by a former Prime Minister once that said, if you're on the bus at 30, you've lost, right?
I remember that, yeah.
I mean, we've got to flip that around. So where my sister lives in Zurich, everyone catches the tram, right? The richest banker catches the tram. My sister's not a rich banker, she catches the tram. So it's just what people do, and we've got to cross that cultural boundary. So that's going to be key. There's another complexity to this though, and I mentioned at the beginning about our population growth, right? Mm-hmm. So 460,000 people up to 550,000 people, that's a lot. That's a lot of people wanting to come to the city and being born here, probably going to want cars as well. We've got to do the housing crisis. But that comes to one of the points that we've made about needing to build homes in the middle of the city. So think about some of the controversial, they become controversial because people take to Twitter. Western Harbour, right, the end of the docks, 2,000 households could be put there, right? That's a 7-minute bike ride. It's a 20 to 25-minute walk of the main retail, employment, entertainment zone.
Yeah.
That's where we need to build. Yeah. Baltic Wharf on the edge of the docks.
Yeah.
That's going to be the same, time-wise. We need to be focusing on brownfield sites. Think of Castle Park View on the edge of Castle Park now. But that also comes into density, right? So the World Bank have just produced a report. Pancakes or pyramids? That's one for your engineers. Well, as you develop your city, how do you develop? Do you pancake?
Go out.
And tell me about the transport consequences of a pancake development. Yeah. Well, you sprawl. And where do people end up? Miles from the, what do they then do? They want their transport option. Yeah. If you develop as a pyramid, right, you can put more people in a small space of land in the middle of the city. Then they can walk. But then you've got the challenge, so that's density. But then I've got people say, well, don't build on greenfield on the edge of the city, but we don't want you to build high and dense in the middle of the city. Right. So you don't want us to build at all? Yeah. Right? And that's when politics becomes mature, and I'm quite pushed back on that. Yeah. Well, great. I know what your single issue campaign is, but now I want you to live with the consequences of that. You don't want us to build up, you don't want us to build out. Do you not want us to build at all? Yeah. Right. You stand in front of Shelter, and you tell Shelter Bristol's a city that's not going to build any houses. Yeah. In the face of the current housing crisis.
And I know, I'm sure you know, like a city like San Francisco, which has huge problems around accommodation and the cost, has some of the most, in theory, environmental, forward-thinking, and yet they're sort of extreme NIMBYism.
Well, that's a little bit of the class and race snobbery that can exist in kind of progressive politics. Just because someone sits on the right spot of the political spectrum, the left of centre, they like woolly jumpers and buying organic or whatever, does not necessarily mean that the way they approach things is actually in line with what we call a just transition.
Yeah. That was quite transport focused. If we were going to talk a bit about some of the energy stuff you mentioned and some of the sort of how we start to decarbonise that system. So things like Bristol, like many other British cities, has quite an old housing stock. Most of the housing that we have now is going to be the housing that we have 2030, 2050, 2100. Things like improving people's heating systems, doing more insulation. What are some of the things that the city is sort of thinking about and trying to get going now and sort of to tackle that?
So I'll tell you something broadly that we've done is, so we've aligned ourselves to the Global Sustainable Development Goals, these 17 goals, and we've written this one city plan that you're aware of with the city. But what we've said is that we've made this subtle but significant move. We're not just measuring ourselves against the SDGs. We're saying, how do we deliver the SDGs? And that's a subtle change of language, but it actually creates a different approach. How do we deliver on them? Now, we've been sharing that with people who want to come and invest in Bristol. And I had this conversation with Bocklock the other day, which is a housing company by Skanska and IKEA. They do off-site manufactured homes. So, they build the walls and the components in a factory, they bring them on site, we just click it together like Lego. Bocklock have built themselves around the SDGs, and there were other companies saying, oh, so if we do the SDGs, you'll be more inclined to work with us. We said, yeah, but more people are getting tuned in. So let's look at that Bocklock scheme. It's on Airport Road, 200 homes, off-site manufacturing. They're actually they've showed us that both in terms of construction, because they're not on site doing bricks and loads of cement and all this sort of stuff now, they're building a factory and bringing them and clicking them together. They are reducing I don't want to say the number, but there's quite a drastic reduction in the amount of carbon associated with each house. In Alderman's Mall, where we built homes, there's ground source heat. So I went round there and visited a house. Family opened the door, and it's like this heat came out. They didn't have the heating on. It's ground source, and the house is super efficient. So she said, the owner said, I don't have to turn the heat on. The house is just warm, is the way it works. So that ground source heat, a more efficient build in construction, but then the way the house is put together as well, all comes together to reduce to increase the efficiency of our housing stock. But the real challenge, as you said at the beginning, is the old houses, the old stock. Where we have to go down retrofit and make them efficient. But again, that costs lots of money, and we've got to get that investment.
And so, with something like retrofitting, would it be asking those who can afford it to do it, as in to cover that cost themselves, and that for those who can't, then that's where either national government via Bristol City Council comes in, or is it some sort of like interplay between those things?
I think it'll be an interplay.
Yeah.
Right. So there'll be a benefit for a householder in that their bills will go down. Just like if you buy a car with a cleaner engine, your road tax is lower. Yeah. But there's a privilege in that too, right? You can go and buy a new car. So you've got to be careful about the privilege in that. But we can't just wait to see what happens. There has to be a plan. Yeah. It can't be if you can do it, do it. If you can't, don't. Yeah. Wealthy people probably get their accountants onto it anyway. Given they ain't got any money, so it has to be planned. There's another little challenge here as well. I'll show you how many plates we have to spin. We know what we want to do. Even if we had the money today, though, we couldn't start that work in any meaningful way. Why? We don't have the workforce.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, we just haven't got any workers.
There's just like not enough people trained up to do the jobs.
No. So if we're switching from gas boilers, for example, to air source heat boilers, don't have the. That's a specific set of skills that need to be transferred over. But again, if we had the money attached to a plan, what you could say is, in 2 years, we're going to start a project replacing X 10,000s of boilers. We need X people, join this course, train for a year, 2 years, whatever it is, and there's a guaranteed job for you at the end of it.
Right? And this was, as I remember, one of the sticking points of the Green Homes grants.
The companies collapsed, didn't they?
Well, and like a lot of people were wanting to take it up, but there just there weren't enough people to actually come and actually do the work.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously we're focused on young people. Do you actually feel you said there's a kind of a big opportunity if the money was there and the opportunities, but in terms of like young people going, looking for careers, wanting to train, all the things we're talking about, whether that's being heating engineers or whether that's being urban planners or transport planners, are you seeing kind of there's the potential for for huge opportunities for young people in this kind of sector?
I think so. And the jobs are broad, right?
Mm.
So you need someone who's going to get their hands on something and do it, but you need someone who can get an Excel sheet out and write a project, project management plan and manage a project across hundreds of thousands of houses across a patch. So there are opportunities in it, but we need good writers too. People out there making the case, good quality journalists, not and that's my bugbear. Not single issue journalists, looking for a click on social media, but people will say, let me talk to you about the new ones. Just like I shared with you at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Yes, climate change is an existential threat, but for some people, eating is their number one priority.
Yeah.
How do I not have my child end up, being groomed and trafficked by county lines? Is their number one priority. And we, as a city, we have to work with all of those. You have to deal with all those things at the same time.
Yeah. Talked a bit about transport, a bit about energy. I know there's lots of other bits of the climate action plan. Is there anything else you would kind of flag as you kind of think like this is whether it's to do with waste or whether it's to do with actually energy creation? Is there sort of other pieces where you think Bristol, this is actually if this happens, this is quite a transformative, exciting thing?
Well, the City Leap is probably the most exciting. So it's £1 billion package of investment. We're getting partners to come in, and it would basically transform the city's relationship with energy, from the generation, renewables, distribution through things like heat networks, to storage, smart, battery storage, and then smart usage as well with items in people's homes. So we balance out pressure on the grid. We're working through. We're down to 2 companies now, or 2 partnerships coming to bidders left in the running after a wave of interest at the front end. But this is such an innovative approach to making up for the absence of national government vision and money that now people are getting incredibly interested in it. And we've been asked to talk about it at COP as well. So if that comes off, it becomes a template that other places can use.
And why was it? I know a tiny bit about City Leap. Why was that approach for that sort of energy piece? Why was that the right approach for that, as opposed to maybe other things? Why was it sort of City Leap that got formed?
Because it had to happen.
Okay.
Right. Our relationship with energy is when we're obviously that's it, isn't it? Right. It determines so much. It determines our impact on the planet, and we had to move. Right. Time to act is now. So by really grabbing a hold of, working with, developing this vehicle, this approach that would allow us to mobilise £1 billion worth of private finance to come in there. That's a fantastic opportunity for the city. The innovation happened here, smart people here, and we're going down the path. But hopefully other people can learn from us as well.
In terms of, we're still in the pandemic. Maybe we're in we'll come out of a slight lull. Who knows what the winter's going to hold? Do you feel, has that shifted, has going through the pandemic shifted how you see things like the One City Plan and the Climate Action Plan? Are you seeing a different future for how people relate to, just on a practical level, where they work and how they commute and all of those kind of areas? Do you see something that's shifted, or it's kind of it will shake out, and who's to be able to predict the future?
I don't know. I mean, certainly it doubled down our understanding of the need to work as a city. So all we did on say hunger in Bristol that we knew was going to kick off, we did as a city. And by that, not just the council, worked with business, worked with schools, and all we did on digital exclusion was with the city. And my director of public health said, if we did not have a city office, we'd have had to have created it. But the fact is, we'd had all these relationships in place. So now every Wednesday at 12:30, I have a call with leaders from the universities, business, Bristol Cultural Partnership, voluntary sector, faith groups. We all just connect on Tuesday, right, for an hour. That's it. We get the truth on COVID, so they get numbers, not like what's being reported, what's going on here, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, and then we raise other issues. Domestic violence is an issue, child hunger is an issue, loneliness, the mental health tail of COVID as well that will go on for some time. So city approach has just been proved right. But there's two things I'd say. Shift. Do I think there's been a shift? I don't know. I really don't know. So I certainly think we've had a taste of what it's like when the world gets out of control. And that it's been a humbling period of time. Because I think that up to the time of COP, the general sense amongst humanity is someone somewhere could decide for this not to happen. Right? A war, someone somewhere could decide not to have a war.
Yeah.
Migration crisis, someone somewhere could decide to treat migrants good, pick them up out of the channel, whatever, and give them a good welcome. Right? Someone somewhere. COVID came, and there was no one anywhere. Right? Now, eventually, yeah, we got to vaccines, but that doesn't stop it altogether. There's still consequence. The economy shut down. We were not in control. And my sense as COVID came, it was no one would welcome. I'm not saying that, but if you want a timely reminder of what going over the tipping point on climate change could begin to feel like, and what they could do to the world, COVID was it. The blessing with COVID is there was a way out the other side. The danger with climate change is you get to a point where there is no way out the other side. It is on a constant spiral. So I hope it sharpened minds in that sense, and I'm sure in many places it has. My fear is that we've gone through times in world history before when we think, okay, this is it. First World War was the war to end all wars, right? Then we had another war, right? Then we had, you had everything tied up with Hitler, genocide. These things still happen. Then you had the Cold War. We got to the edge of nuclear war under Kennedy, and yet we still went back to it. And then we had major financial collapse in the 70s. We had the civil rights movement, the independence through the 60s and 70s. The end of like militaristic colonialism was replaced by banking colonialism or financial colonialism. But coming to the 80s, we had another crash. Bring it up to modern day, you had the financial crash in 2000. We thought this was it. We had the anti-globalization in the late 90s. We thought, oh, this is it. We go through these moments of crises and we think, oh, the world is changing. And then we find out, actually, that the status quo is remarkably resilient and adaptable. Not because necessarily any individual chooses for it to be that way, but we slide back in. And that's my fear, is then that sense of urgency and stroke opportunity that this urgency brings will be lost on us.
And can we get to the place you would like to get to? Can we get to, quote unquote, solve the climate crisis within the status quo, or does there need to be a more fundamental shift?
Yeah. Well, here now you catch me out in my own language, because what is the status quo, right? Can we? We certainly can't solve it within the current framework. I mean, basically, climate destruction is a product of our economic model. It's what it says value is, right? It does not say that there is, there's lots of things that we don't recognise as being valuable. Clean air isn't worth any money, for example, Clean water is not worth money. Ending poverty is not worth money, right? So our model doesn't register those things, and so they don't turn up. And the big driver is our economic model. So there has to be some shift in what the model values and what it puts a price against. So I'm not an optimist, all right? But what I am is a person of hope. Desmond Tutu talks about hope rather than optimism. So I'm hopeful, but it's a challenge.
Maybe as a final...
It's British understatement.
A British understatement, exactly.
It's a challenge.
It's realistic optimism. Maybe as a final piece, you were talking about COP26. You're going up. Remarkably, I've just been invited to go up, so I'm going to be up there too, talking about black and green ambassadors.
I was just going through the schedule this morning. I see you there.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
What we may, I don't know, I was about to project onto it, so we may have our cynicisms about COP as a thing, but what are you looking to get out of it? What are you going to be doing there? What's your hopes for it?
Interesting, cynicism. These words do matter. I don't know if I'm cynical either.
That was me.
Yeah, I know. No, it's a good word. But these things are important because actually they create a mood, and they create a mood around how we approach. So when I got people screaming at me like someone did outside the City Hall once, you don't care. Where do we go from there? We're doing all this stuff around climate. And because I don't see the world the way you see it, understand it how you see it, approach it how you see it, you say I don't care. When actually maybe you're not taking into account some of the things I'm taking into account, like child hunger, for example, you know, which makes me think you don't care. But I wouldn't say that, because then it robs us of the opportunity to form the kind of partnership that actually we need to take on this major challenge that is not in between us, but is over there, and we must face together. But what do I hope from COP? I hope it releases lots of money. That's the bottom line. I'm involved in a whole bunch of work up there. I'm doing. There'll be a number of key strains, but two of the key things I'm working on is climate-driven migration. So I sit on the Mayor's Migration Council. MMC it's called. It's got a joint. We've been doing a joint piece of work with C40, which is the network of big cities in the world that work on climate change. We've worked together to work on climate-driven migration. Potentially 200 million climate-driven migrants by the middle of this century. Right? Add that onto what climate change could do for domestic politics and joblessness. Add migration onto that, and you've got a cocktail for extremist politics. Right? So it's on many, many levels. So I'm working on that, but I'm also doing a series of events on finance, which is basically about we need £200 million to decarbonise the UK's biggest cities. And we can't wait. If we can get it planned now, we can put the systems in place that are decarbonised. Also, a nice little boost for building back better. We can provide jobs for people, so they're eating, right? So then we can support a just transition. There's a lot more complexity to it than that, but those are the basic underlying truths. So migration and finance are my two key activities.
And do you, like, from the conversations you've had up until this point, you know, lots of people are talking about how this is like the COP 10 all COPs in terms of like this is like the time. Do you feel any sense of like this is a shift, like as in like as you go into it, kind of like actually people seem to be taking it more seriously, or kind of like is there any sense of that, or is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. When I worked in the health service on race equality and mental health, and I said to my team at the time, I kind of grouped leaders into three categories, right? There were some who were overtly hostile, right? They didn't like people who didn't look like them, right? That's your opponent, right? There are some who want to do the right thing but don't know what to do because it's complicated. They're not your enemy. They're not your enemy. They're potential ally. There are some who know what they want to do. They know how to do it, but they can't get systems to change around them because systems are big. They're very powerful. They're not your enemy either, right? Now that could be. You can see the same on climate change. There'll be some leaders who just say, do you know what? I'm not interested. Climate denier, or maybe I just want the growth and I'll burn coal to do it and all the rest of it. Right, that's the challenge. There'll be some leaders who are going, this is a massive problem. I just don't know where to start. Right? There are others who are saying, right, I know what I want to do, but I can't make my country work. I can't make the world work. Imagine we'll find a mix of all that out there. We've got to find a way of getting those latter two, making them powerful, and putting the solutions on the table, and then enabling those solutions. And again, I think it's finance, and it's actually working through cities as well.
That's all my hard questions for you from the students. For the young engineers that are watching this, that are sort of interested in how we tackle sustainability, whether it's to do with energy or waste or transport, whatever it means, what would you say to some of those students who kind of like look at some of these issues that we're talking about and it's quite overwhelming, and yet they've got that kind of engineering sort of mindset of like, actually I like a problem and I like to sort of tackle things. Is it a message of kind of hope, or what would you say to?
Oh, hope. I'm always hopeful, just not optimistic. But you'd have to do a little bit of reading around that to make the distinction. Yeah, I mean, for people with those skill sets, I'll say you where we need to be. I used the example at the beginning. You know, it is, of course we want people, making their voices heard and political campaigning. But at some point you need someone with an Excel sheet and a drawing saying, this is how the energy system's going to work, and I know how to make it work. This is how we're going to build zero carbon houses that are affordable, and we can mass produce them. We can tap it out. We need people who say this is how, right? And I say one person with a solution is worth 100 people shouting at me with a problem, right? and not just worth it to me, but to the planet. So people with those skill sets are just commit yourself to it, and we look forward to you coming up with those solutions.
Mr. Mayor Marvin Rees, thank you very much for your time.
No, all good.
Thank you, everyone.